The gunshot echoed through Cottonwood Canyon, sending a flock of startled ravens into the crimson Arizona sky. Nora Parker pressed her back against the sandstone wall, her chest heaving as she clutched the leather satchel containing her life savings. The three outlaws advancing toward her wore cruel smiles that promised nothing good for a woman alone in the wilderness. "Nowhere left to run, pretty lady," drawled the tallest of the men, his face scarred from what appeared to be an old knife wound. "Hand over the money bag, and maybe we'll let you walk away." Nora knew better. The stories about the Coulter gang had spread through Bodie and every town in Cochise County. They left no witnesses. Her fingers trembled against the rough leather of her satchel as she scanned the towering rock walls for any escape route. There was none. "I earned this money honestly," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is all I have in the world." The second outlaw, a squat man with a graying beard, spat tobacco juice onto the canyon floor. "Don't matter none how you earned it. It's ours now." As they moved closer, Nora's mind flashed to her father's homestead, to the dream of expanding their cattle operation that now seemed destined to die here in this desolate canyon. The third outlaw, younger than the others but with eyes just as cold, reached for his pistol. That's when the sound of approaching hoofbeats filled the canyon. The outlaws turned, momentarily distracted, as a rider on a magnificent chestnut stallion rounded the bend. Tall and broad-shouldered, the man's face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Nora could see the determined set of his jaw as he assessed the situation in an instant. Without hesitation, he dismounted in one fluid motion, positioning himself between Nora and the three men. His hand hovered near the pistol at his hip, but he didn't draw, not yet. "Step behind me," he said to Nora, his voice low and steady. Nora didn't hesitate. She moved behind the stranger, noticing for the first time the silver star pinned to his vest. A lawman. "This ain't your concern, cowboy," snarled the scarred outlaw. "We're just having a friendly conversation with the lady." "Three armed men cornering a woman alone." The lawman shook his head. "Doesn't look friendly to me." He tipped his hat back slightly, revealing piercing blue eyes. "I'm Preston Foster, U.S. Marshal, and you boys look an awful lot like the Coulter gang that's wanted in 3 territories." The outlaws exchanged glances, clearly recalculating their odds. The youngest one's hand twitched toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Preston said calmly. "I've got a reputation for being faster than most." The scarred leader sized up the marshal, then spat on the ground. "This ain't over," he growled, before signaling his companions. They backed away slowly, mounting their horses that were tethered nearby. "We'll be seeing you again, Marshal," the leader called over his shoulder as they rode away. "Both of you." Only when the sound of their horses had faded did Preston turn to face Nora. "Are you hurt, madam?" Nora shook her head, her honey blonde hair catching the late afternoon sun. "No, thanks to you." She extended her hand. "Nora Parker, I owe you my life, Marshal Foster." He took her hand briefly, his grip firm but gentle. "Preston, and I was just doing my job. What brings a U.S. Marshal to this remote part of the territory? Those men, the Coulter gang. They've been robbing stage coaches and homesteads across Arizona." His gaze moved to the horizon where the outlaws had disappeared. "I've been tracking them for 3 weeks. Well, your timing couldn't have been better." Nora straightened her dusty riding skirt. "My horse spooked and threw me about a mile back. I was trying to make it to town on foot when they cornered me." Preston nodded toward his chestnut stallion. "Copper and I can get you to Bodie before nightfall. It's not safe out here with those men still roaming." As Nora looked up at the tall lawman, something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent brush with death. There was something about him, a quiet strength, Perhaps that made her feel safer than she had in months. "I'd be much obliged, Marshal." Preston helped her mount his horse before swinging up behind her. The closeness of him, his steady breathing, the solid wall of his chest against her back, sent an unexpected warmth through Nora's body despite the cooling desert air. "Hold on tight," he said, his voice close to her ear as he urged Copper forward. As they rode toward Bodie with the setting sun painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and gold, Nora couldn't help but wonder if this chance encounter might change the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The small frontier town of Bodie appeared on the horizon, just as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. Nestled in the foothills of the Dragoon Mountains, it was a typical Arizona settlement, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a couple of saloons, a general store, and the essential services needed for the ranchers and miners who called the area home. "You're new to these parts," Preston observed as they approached the town. Nora nodded. "My father and I moved here from Kansas 6 months ago. We have a small ranch about 5 miles east of town. Parker Ranch, I've heard of it." "Your father's that Easterner who brought in those fancy Hereford cattle, isn't he?" "Yes," Nora said with a hint of pride. "People laughed at first, but he's proving that properly bred cattle can thrive even in this harsh country." Preston guided his horse down the main street, past the Golden Nugget Saloon where piano music and raucous laughter spilled out into the night. Several townspeople nodded respectfully at the marshal as they passed. "You're well known here," Nora observed. "I've been stationed in this district for about 2 years," Preston explained, "though I'm on the trail more often than not." There was something in his tone, a weariness perhaps, that suggested the nomadic life of a marshal wasn't entirely to his liking. They stopped in front of the modest sheriff's office, and Preston dismounted first before helping Nora down. His hands lingered at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary, and their eyes met in the golden light spilling from the office windows. "I should get you home," he said, breaking the momentary spell. "Your father must be worried." Nora glanced down the darkened street toward the livery stable. "My horse is gone, and it's too far to walk. I was planning to stay at the boarding house tonight and head home tomorrow." Preston frowned. "The Coulter gang is still out there, and they've seen your face. I don't like the idea of you staying in town alone. I'll be fine at Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house. She runs a respectable establishment. I'm sure she does, but—" Preston seemed to be wrestling with a decision. "Let me check in with Sheriff Hayes first. I need to report the gang's location, and then I'll escort you to your father's ranch myself." Nora started to protest, but saw the determination in his eyes. "That's very kind of you, Marshal, but I don't want to be a burden." "It's no burden." His gaze held her steadily. "It's my duty to see the citizens of this territory safe." Something in his voice told Nora that this was more than just duty to him, but she simply nodded her agreement. Inside the sheriff's office, they found a harried-looking man with a salt and pepper mustache sorting through wanted posters. He looked up as they entered, his expression brightening at the sight of Preston. "Foster, didn't expect to see you back so soon." His curious gaze shifted to Nora. "Sheriff Hayes, this is Miss Nora Parker from the Parker Ranch," Preston introduced her. "She had a run-in with the Coulter gang in Cottonwood Canyon this afternoon." Hayes's bushy eyebrows shot up. "The Coulters, here in our county," Preston nodded grimly. "They're moving south. I was tracking them from Prescott when I came across Miss Parker." As Preston filled Hayes in on the details, Nora observed the marshal in the lamplight. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he had today. His dark hair, now free from his hat, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "I'll organize a posse at first light," Hayes was saying. "We can't have those murderers terrorizing honest folk in our county." "I'll join you," Preston agreed, "but first I need to escort Miss Parker safely home." Hayes nodded his understanding, then turned to Nora with genuine concern. "You're lucky the marshal found you when he did, Miss Parker. The Coulters don't usually leave witnesses." A shiver ran down Nora's spine at the sheriff's blunt assessment. "Yes, I'm very grateful." "You have a horse we can borrow?" Preston asked Hayes. "Miss Parker's through her earlier today." "Take my bay gelding," Hayes offered. "He's gentle enough for a lady." After making arrangements to meet the posse at dawn, Preston led Nora to the small stable behind the sheriff's office where Hayes kept his horse. As Preston saddled the bay, Nora studied him by the light of the hanging lantern. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said softly. "You must be tired from your travels." Preston secured the cinch before answering. "I wouldn't rest easy knowing you were in potential danger." He paused, then added, "Besides, I'd like to meet this father of yours who's bold enough to bring Herefords to Arizona territory." Nora laughed, the sound bright in the quiet stable. "He's certainly a character, stubborn as they come, with ideas that most locals think are pure madness." "Sounds like my kind of man," Preston said with a smile that transformed his serious face and made Nora's heart skip a beat. They rode out of town side by side, the moon now high enough to silver the landscape. The desert night had turned cool, and Nora pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Cold?" Preston asked, noticing her movement. "A little. The temperature drops quickly out here after sunset." Without hesitation, Preston reined in his horse and shrugged out of his long duster coat. "Here," he said, passing it to her. "This should help." The coat was still warm from his body as Nora draped it around herself, and she caught the scent of leather, sage, and something distinctly masculine. "Thank you," she murmured, oddly touched by the simple gesture. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a night bird. Eventually, Nora's curiosity got the better of her. "How does someone become a U.S. Marshal?" she asked. "It seems like a lonely life." Preston considered her question before answering. "It can be. I was a Texas Ranger first, then took the Marshal's badge after the war. Seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And now," he glanced at her, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Now. Sometimes I wonder what it might be like to stay in one place, to build something lasting instead of always chasing the next outlaw." "Like a home," Nora suggested softly. "Maybe." His gaze returned to the trail ahead. "What about you? What brings a refined young woman like yourself to the Arizona territory?" Nora laughed. "I'm hardly refined. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and I can rope and ride as well as any man." Preston's eyes twinkled with amusement. "I don't doubt that for a minute. After my mother died 2 years ago, Father became restless. He'd always dreamed of raising cattle in the West where land was plentiful. When he read about the opportunities in Arizona, nothing could dissuade him." She sighed. "It's been challenging, but we're making progress. Slowly." "It takes courage to start over," Preston said with admiration, "both for your father and for you." "You have family, Marshal Foster?" Nora asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Not anymore. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my uncle in San Antonio." "I'm sorry," Nora said, sensing there was more to the story but respecting his privacy. The silhouette of the Parker Ranch appeared in the distance, a modest main house with several outbuildings and corrals. A lamp burned in the window, suggesting Nora's father was indeed waiting up for her. As they approached, the front door swung open and a tall, lean man with a shock of white hair and a formidable beard stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "That's far enough," he called out, raising the weapon. "Who's there?" "It's me, Father," Nora called back. "Nora, and I've brought a guest." Nathan Parker lowered his rifle as they rode into the yard. His weathered face relaxed at the sight of his daughter but showed clear curiosity about her companion. "Mr. Parker, I'm U.S. Marshal Preston Foster." Preston introduced himself as they dismounted. "I had the good fortune to meet your daughter today when she was in some difficulty." Nathan Parker's sharp eyes took in the marshal's badge and the way Preston stood protectively near Nora. "What kind of difficulty?" "She was confronted by outlaws in Cottonwood Canyon," Preston explained. "The Coulter gang." Nathan's face paled. "Good Lord, girl." He pulled his daughter into a fierce embrace. "When your horse came back without you, I feared the worst. I was just about to ride out myself when my bad leg started acting up." "I'm fine, Father," Nora assured him, returning the hug. "Thanks to Marshal Foster." Nathan extended his hand to Preston. "Then I'm deeply in your debt, Marshal. Please come inside. It's too late for you to head back to town now." Preston hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," Nathan insisted. "We've got a spare room, and I'd be honored to offer you a meal and a bed for the night. It's the least I can do." Recognizing that argument was futile, Preston nodded his acceptance and followed the Parkers into their home. The ranch house was modest but comfortable, with handcrafted furniture and touches that spoke of a woman's influence, despite Nora being the only female resident. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and kerosene lamps cast a warm glow over the main room. "Sit, sit," Nathan urged, gesturing to the table. "Nora, there's stew keeping warm on the stove. Would you mind serving our guest while I put away his horses?" "I can tend to the horses," Preston offered, but Nathan waved him off. "You've done enough for one day, Marshal. Besides, my daughter makes the best biscuits in the territory, and they're getting cold." After Nathan limped outside, Nora removed Preston's duster and hung it by the door before busying herself at the stove. "He's right about one thing, I do make excellent biscuits." Preston smiled, watching her move comfortably around the kitchen. "I don't doubt that either." As Nora ladled the rich beef stew into bowls, she stole glances at Preston. In the homey setting of the ranch house, he seemed both at ease and slightly out of place, as if unaccustomed to domestic comfort. "How long has it been since you had a home-cooked meal, Marshal?" she asked, setting a steaming bowl and plate of biscuits before him. "Too long to remember," he admitted, inhaling the savory aroma. "And please call me Preston. I think we're past formalities after what we've been through today." Their eyes met again, and something warm and unspoken passed between them before the front door opened and Nathan returned, bringing with him the crisp night air. Over the simple but hearty meal, Nathan questioned Preston about the Coulter gang and the danger they posed to the area. Preston answered frankly but tried to minimize the threat to avoid alarming them further. "Will you join the posse tomorrow?" Nathan asked. Preston nodded. "I'm meeting Sheriff Hayes and his men at dawn. We hope to track the gang while their trail is still fresh." "Wish I could ride with you," Nathan said, rubbing his leg. "Old war injury acts up something fierce these days." "You were in the war, sir?" Preston asked. "Union cavalry," Nathan confirmed, "though that seems like another lifetime ago now." He glanced at his daughter with obvious pride. "Nora was just a child then. Her mother held things together while I was gone. After Martha passed, I promised myself I'd build something lasting for Nora's future." "Father," Nora protested gently, "I'm perfectly capable of making my own future." Nathan chuckled. "That you are, daughter. That you are." As the meal concluded, Nora showed Preston to the spare room, a simple space with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the corrals. "It's not much," she apologized, "but the mattress is comfortable. "It's perfect," Preston assured her. "Far better than the ground I've been sleeping on for weeks." They stood awkwardly for a moment in the doorway, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Nora spoke. "Thank you again for what you did today. I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Preston's expression grew serious. "I'm just glad I was there." He hesitated, then added, "Though I wish we could have met under different circumstances." The implication of his words that he was glad to have met her at all wasn't lost on Nora. A flush crept into her cheeks. "Get some rest, Marshal Preston," she said softly. "Tomorrow we'll come early." "Good night, Nora," he replied, her name sounding different somehow when he said it. As she walked down the hallway to her own room, Nora tried to make sense of the strange fluttering in her chest. She had met plenty of men since coming to Arizona, but none had affected her the way Preston Foster had in just a few short hours. Perhaps it was simply gratitude, she told herself, or the drama of the day. Yet somehow, she knew it was more than that. Much more. Dawn broke crisp and clear over the Parker ranch. Preston woke to the sound of activity in the kitchen and the aroma of coffee brewing. He dressed quickly, strapping on his gun belt with practiced ease, and made his way to the main room. Nora stood at the stove, her honey blonde hair braided and pinned at the nape of her neck, wearing a simple cotton dress with a practical apron. The morning light streaming through the window highlighted her profile, and Preston found himself pausing in the doorway, struck by how at home she looked and by how much that image appealed to him. She turned, sensing his presence, and smiled. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Preston admitted, stepping into the room. "Something about a real roof and a proper bed. There's coffee ready, and I'm frying up some eggs and bacon. Father's out checking on the cattle, but he should be back shortly." Preston poured himself a cup of the strong, black coffee and leaned against the counter, watching as Nora efficiently prepared breakfast. There was something companionable about the moment, as if they'd shared dozens of mornings like this instead of just meeting the day before. "I should head into town soon," he said reluctantly. "The posse will be gathering." Nora nodded, her expression turning serious. "Do you think you'll find them?" "The Coulter gang will find them," Preston said with quiet confidence. "Men like that get careless eventually. They think they're untouchable." "And when you do find them," Nora asked, her eyes meeting his. "What then?" Preston understood the unspoken question. "I'll bring them in alive if possible. They deserve to face a judge and jury." His jaw tightened. "But they won't surrender easily, and I won't risk the lives of good men to spare theirs." Nora served up the eggs and bacon onto plates. "It seems a heavy burden deciding such things." "It is," Preston acknowledged. "But someone has to stand for law and order, or places like Bodie would descend into chaos." He took a seat at the table as she set the food before him. "What about you? What are your days like here?" Her face brightened. "Busy, but good. I help Father with the ranch books and correspondence. I ride out with the hands sometimes to check the herds, and I've started a small vegetable garden that's finally beginning to produce." "Sounds like you've made a home here." "We're trying," Nora said, "though it hasn't been without challenges. Some of the local ranchers don't appreciate our Eastern ways, as they call them. They think Father's ideas about selective breeding and rotating grazing lands are nonsense." Preston smiled. "Progress often looks like nonsense to those set in their ways." The door opened and Nathan Parker entered, his limp more pronounced in the mornings. "Marshal, good you're up. Thought I might have missed you." "Just having breakfast, sir," Preston replied. "Your daughter is an excellent cook." Nathan beamed with paternal pride as he joined them at the table. "That she is. Got her mother's touch in the kitchen, among other talents." As they ate, Nathan peppered Preston with questions about law enforcement in the territory and his experiences as a marshal. Preston answered candidly, finding himself enjoying the older man's curiosity and sharp mind. "Ever thought about settling down?" Nathan asked abruptly. "A man can't live by the badge alone his whole life." "Father," Nora admonished, embarrassed by the personal question. Preston gave a small smile. "It's all right. I've been thinking about it more lately, this kind of work. It takes its toll after a while." Nathan nodded sagely. "War was the same way. Comes a time when a man wants to build rather than destroy." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Preston was immediately alert, his hand moving instinctively to his gun. "Expecting visitors?" he asked Nathan. "Not this early," Nathan replied, frowning. Preston moved to the window, carefully positioning himself to the side as he peered out. Relief washed over his face. "It's Sheriff Hayes and 2 deputies." He opened the door as the men dismounted in the yard. Hayes looked grim as he approached. "Foster good, saved us a ride to town. We need to head out now." His eyes darted to the Parkers. "Morning, Nathan, Miss Parker." "What's happened?" Preston asked. "Coulter gang hit the Wilcox Ranch last night," Hayes said tersely. "Killed 2 hands and made off with the payroll. They're heading south toward the border." Preston's jaw tightened. "Give me 2 minutes." He turned to the Parkers, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, but duty calls." "Of course," Nathan said, extending his hand. "You go do what needs doing. And know you've got a welcome waiting here when you return." Preston shook the older man's hand firmly, then turned to Nora, who stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of concern and something deeper that made his heart quicken. "Be careful," she said softly. "I will." He hesitated, then reached for his hat on the hook by the door. As he did so, his hand brushed against hers and he allowed the contact to linger for just a moment. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Will you?" Nora began, then seemed to reconsider her words. "Will you let us know when you return safely?" Preston nodded, understanding the request for what it was a reason to see each other again. "Count on it." With a final nod to Nathan, Preston strode out to where Copper waited, already saddled by one of the deputies. As he mounted, he cast one last glance at the ranch house, at Nora standing in the doorway, her hand raised in farewell. Something tugged at him, a reluctance to leave that was foreign to his usual sense of duty. But the Coulter gang had killed again, and the trail was growing hot. With a signal to Hayes, Preston urged Copper forward, and the posse thundered away from the Parker ranch, raising dust that glinted golden in the morning sun. Nora watched until they disappeared from view, her thoughts in turmoil. In just one day, a stranger had entered her life and somehow in that brief time had come to matter in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. "He's a good man," Nathan said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," Nora agreed. "He is." "And a dangerous profession," her father added, his tone neutral. "Not the sort of man most young women would set their cap for." Nora turned to him, a smile playing at her lips. "Since when have I been like most young women?" Nathan laughed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Not a day in your life, daughter. Not a day in your life." 3 days passed with no word from Preston or the posse. Nora tried to keep busy with her usual duties around the ranch, but she found herself watching the horizon more often than she cared to admit. Each approaching rider caused her heart to leap, only to sink when it proved to be one of their ranch hands or a neighbor. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Nora was in the garden harvesting tomatoes when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her breath catch as she recognized the chestnut stallion and its rider. Preston looked exhausted, his clothes dusty and a growth of stubble darkening his jaw, but he sat tall in the saddle as he approached. Nora set down her basket and walked to meet him, trying to keep her pace measured despite the urge to run. "Marshal Foster," she greeted him, unable to keep the smile from her face. "You've returned." Preston dismounted, his movements stiff as if from long hours in the saddle. "I promised I would." "You look tired," Nora observed, noting the shadows under his eyes. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" "Both," he admitted with a small smile. "But mostly I wanted to let you know we caught them. The Coulter gang won't be troubling anyone again." Relief washed over Nora. "All of them?" Preston nodded, his expression solemn. "The leader and one other will stand trial. The youngest didn't give us a choice." He didn't elaborate, but Nora understood what he meant. "I'm sorry it came to that." "So am I," Preston said quietly. "Every time." She led him to the house, where she poured him a glass of cool water from the pitcher she kept in the shade. He drank deeply, the simple pleasure of clean water seeming to revive him somewhat. "Father's in town today, meeting with the banker," Nora explained. "But I could fix you something to eat if you'd like to stay." "I should report to the sheriff," Preston said, though he made no move to leave. "But perhaps I could rest a few minutes first." Nora gestured to the chair on the porch. "Please sit. You look dead on your feet." Preston sank into the chair gratefully, setting his hat on his knee. Nora took the seat beside him, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt to be alone with him. "Tell me about the chase," she prompted, partly out of curiosity and partly to fill the silence. Preston described how they had tracked the Coulter gang deep into the mountains, following a trail that the Outlaws had tried unsuccessfully to hide. The pursuit had led to a remote cabin where the gang had holed up, resulting in a tense standoff that ended with the capture of 2 members and the death of the third. "Hayes is escorting the prisoners to Tucson for trial," Preston concluded. "I broke off to return to Bodie and file my report." "And to keep your promise," Nora added softly. Their eyes met and Preston nodded. "Yes, that too." A comfortable silence fell between them as they sat side by side, watching the play of light and shadow across the ranch yard as clouds drifted overhead. Eventually, Preston spoke again. "I've been thinking about what your father said, about settling down." Nora's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "Oh, I've been a lawman for 8 years. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to wake up in the same place every day. To build something lasting, like he said." Preston's gaze drifted to the mountains in the distance. "When I was tracking the Coulters, I kept thinking about this ranch, about the peace I felt here, even if it was just for one night." "The life we lead here isn't always peaceful," Nora said with a smile. "There are predators, drought, cattle thieves, but there's a rhythm to it, a purpose." Preston nodded. "That's what I miss, I think. A purpose beyond the next manhunt or the next arrest." "What would you do if not be a marshal?" Nora asked. Preston considered the question. "I was raised on a horse ranch in Texas. I understand stock, know how to work the land." A wry smile touched his lips. "Though I suspect I'd have as much to learn about your father's modern methods as any other old cowhand." "Father's always looking for men who are willing to learn," Nora said, her heart racing at the implications of their conversation. "He values intelligence and adaptability over experience sometimes." Preston turned to face her directly. "Nora, I don't want to presume anything. We've known each other only a few days, and yet—" He trailed off, searching for words. "And yet it feels like longer," she finished for him. "Yes." Relief showed in his eyes that she understood. "I can't explain it, but there's something here that I haven't felt before, something that makes me question the path I've been on." Nora gathered her courage. "Perhaps you should stay a few days. Rest. Give yourself time to think clearly." "Is that what you want?" Preston asked, his voice low. "Yes," Nora replied simply. "Very much." The honesty of her answer seemed to touch something in Preston. He reached out slowly and took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Then I'll stay," he said. "For a little while, at least." A little while turned into a week, and then 2. Preston sent a telegram to his superiors requesting leave, citing the need to recover from the demanding pursuit of the Coulter gang. To his surprise, they granted it readily, acknowledging his years of service without break. Nathan Parker welcomed Preston's extended stay with enthusiasm, especially when it became clear that the Marshal had genuine knowledge of ranching and a willingness to learn the innovative methods Nathan was implementing. The two men spent long hours discussing cattle breeding, range management, and the future of ranching in the arid Southwest. For Nora, those weeks were filled with a growing certainty that her life had changed irrevocably the moment Preston Foster had ridden into Cottonwood Canyon. They fell into an easy companionship, working side by side on ranch tasks during the day and talking long into the evening on the porch, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. On a warm evening in late September, Nora and Preston rode out together to check on a pregnant heifer that had separated from the main herd. The sunset painted the landscape in hues of orange and purple as they found the young cow safely delivered of a healthy calf in a sheltered draw. "She seems to be doing well," Nora observed as they watched the mother nuzzling her newborn. "First-time mothers can sometimes reject their calves, but she's taken to motherhood nicely." Preston nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's remarkable, isn't it? The instinct to protect, to nurture. It's there from the beginning." They dismounted to give the new mother some space, leading their horses to a nearby oak tree where they could keep watch from a distance. Preston spread his duster on the ground, and they sat together, shoulders touching, as the last light faded from the sky. "I received a telegram today," Preston said after a comfortable silence. "From the Marshal's office in Tucson." Nora felt a sudden chill despite the warm evening. "Your leave is ending." "Yes." Preston turned to face her, his expression serious but his eyes warm. "They've offered me a choice of assignments. One is tracking a gang of stagecoach robbers in New Mexico territory." "And the other?" Nora asked, her heart in her throat. "A permanent posting as deputy marshal here in Cochise County, based in Bodie." He took her hand. "It would mean less travel, more stability." Hope blossomed in Nora's chest. "You're considering it." "I've already accepted," Preston said quietly. "If there's a reason for me to stay." Nora's breath caught as she met his gaze. "Is there?" Preston reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. "I think you know the answer to that, Nora Parker. From the moment I saw you in that canyon, something changed in me. These past weeks have only confirmed what I think I knew even then." "And what is that?" she whispered. "That I love you," he said simply. "That I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Joy surged through Nora, bright and overwhelming. Without hesitation, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in answer. Preston's arms came around her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, both tender and passionate at once. When they finally parted, breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I take it that's a yes," Nora laughed, her happiness spilling over. "Yes, Preston Foster." "That's most definitely a yes." They remained beneath the oak tree for a long time, talking softly about their future together, about dreams now possible with shared hearts and combined strengths. As the stars wheeled overhead, and the new mother cow continued to tend her calf, Nora marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the space of a few short weeks. From the terror of being cornered by outlaws in a canyon, to the joy of finding love in the most unexpected place, her journey had been as wild and unpredictable as the Arizona landscape itself. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Bodie and the surrounding ranches. Most received it with enthusiasm, particularly when it became known that Preston would be staying on as deputy marshal. A few expressed surprise at the whirlwind nature of the romance, but those who had seen Nora and Preston together recognized the genuine depth of their connection. Nathan Parker was perhaps the least surprised of all. When Preston formally asked for his blessing, the older man simply smiled and said, "I've been expecting this since the morning you rode out with the posse. A father knows these things." The wedding was planned for November, when the fall roundup would be complete and the ranch work less demanding. Nora threw herself into preparations, determined that their celebration would reflect the simple, honest nature of their love rather than excessive formality. On a cool Saturday morning, with the Dragoon Mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Nora Parker became Nora Foster in a ceremony held on the porch of the ranch house. She wore a dress of ivory satin that had been her mother's, altered by her own skilled hands, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Preston stood tall and proud in a new black suit, his marshal's badge polished and gleaming on his vest. Sheriff Hayes served as best man, while Nora's closest friend from town, Sarah Wilkins, stood as her maid of honor. The guests included ranch hands, townspeople from Bodie, and several of Preston's colleagues from the Marshal Service who had ridden in for the occasion. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch decorated with autumn foliage, Nora looked into Preston's eyes and saw her future reflected there, a future built on courage, respect, and a love that had sparked in the most dangerous of circumstances. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with tables set up in the ranch yard, lanterns hung from trees, and a local fiddler providing music for dancing. As twilight descended, Preston led Nora away from the merriment to a quiet spot near the corral. "Happy, Mrs. Foster?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "More than I knew possible," Nora replied, raising her face for his kiss. "I have something for you," Preston said when they parted. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "It's not much, but it has meaning to me." Curious, Nora opened the pouch and tipped its contents into her palm. A delicate gold chain slid out, bearing a simple star pendant similar to a marshal's badge, but smaller and more elegant. "It was my mother's," Preston explained as he fastened it around her neck. "My father gave it to her when they were married. He said she was his guiding star, just as you are mine." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she touched the pendant. "It's beautiful, Preston. I'll treasure it always." "There's something else," he said, taking her hand and leading her toward the barn. "A wedding gift from your father and me together." Inside, lit by a single lantern, stood a magnificent chestnut mare, her coat gleaming in the golden light. "She's Copper's half-sister," Preston explained. "Your father helped me arrange the purchase from my old friend in Texas. She's spirited but gentle, like someone else I know." Nora approached the horse, stroking her velvet muzzle. "She's wonderful, Preston, thank you." "I thought perhaps you could name her," he suggested. Nora considered for a moment, then smiled. "Dawn," she decided. "Because that's what you've brought to my life, a new beginning." Preston drew her close, his kiss tender with promise. "For both of us, my love, for both of us." The years that followed were not without challenges. The Arizona Territory remained a wild place, with droughts, conflicts between ranchers and miners, and occasional trouble from those who lived outside the law. Preston's duties as deputy marshal sometimes took him away from the ranch, though he managed to arrange his responsibilities to limit extended absences. Nathan Parker, seeing his daughter happily settled and the ranch in capable hands, gradually stepped back from day-to-day management, allowing Preston and Nora to implement new ideas while maintaining the progressive approach that had distinguished the Parker Ranch from its inception. In the spring of 1883, their first child was born, a son they named Matthew, after Preston's father. With his arrival, the rhythm of their lives shifted again, expanding to encompass the joys and worries of parenthood. Preston proved to be a natural father, as gentle with his son as he was firm with lawbreakers. 2 years later, their family grew again with the birth of a daughter, Elizabeth, who inherited her mother's honey-blonde hair and her father's piercing blue eyes. Nathan doted on his grandchildren, teaching them about cattle and horses from the time they could toddle at his side. By 1890, Preston had been offered the position of sheriff of Cochise County, a role that would keep him even closer to home, while still allowing him to serve the community. After careful consideration and many discussions with Nora, he accepted, hanging up his marshal's badge for a local star. The Parker Foster Ranch, as it came to be known, flourished under their joint stewardship. Nora's practical intelligence combined with Preston's steady leadership made them respected figures in the ranching community, even among those who had initially scoffed at Nathan's innovative methods. On a warm evening in May of 1895, Nora and Preston sat together on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching 10-year-old Elizabeth leading her pony around the corral while 12-year-old Matthew helped the ranch hands with evening chores. "You ever miss it?" Nora asked, her head resting on Preston's shoulder. The life of a marshal, always on the move. Preston considered the question, his hand absently stroking her arm. "Sometimes I miss the clarity of it, the clear line between right and wrong. But then I look at all we've built together, at our children, at what we've become to each other." He turned to meet her gaze, his eyes as warm as they had been on their wedding day. "And I know I made the only choice that could ever have brought me true happiness." Nora reached up to touch the star pendant she still wore every day. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in Cottonwood Canyon? Step behind me." Preston nodded, smiling at the memory. "How could I forget? It was the moment that changed everything." "I've been thinking about that," Nora said thoughtfully. "In all these years together, you've never once asked me to step behind you again. We've always stood side by side, facing whatever came together." "That's because I learned something important that very first day," Preston replied, taking her hand in his. "That you're as brave as any person I've ever known, man or woman. That we're stronger together than either of us could ever be alone." As the sun set over the Dragoon Mountains, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that had backlit their first ride to Bodie, Preston and Nora Foster shared a kiss that held all the tenderness of new love and all the depth of a bond strengthened through years of partnership. From a moment of danger in a remote canyon to a life rich with purpose and connection, their journey had unfolded in ways neither could have imagined. Yet looking back, it seemed somehow inevitable, as if all paths had been leading them to each other from the very beginning. As twilight deepened into night and their children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard, Nora and Preston remained on the porch, hand in hand, watching the first stars appear in the vast Arizona sky. Their love story, born in danger and nurtured through years of shared dreams and challenges, had become as much a part of the landscape as the mountains that stood sentinel over their home. In the years that followed, the Parker Foster Ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected cattle operations in the Arizona Territory. Preston's reputation as a fair but firm sheriff made Bodie a town where law-abiding citizens could live and work in peace, while those with criminal intentions learned to give the area a wide berth. By the turn of the century, significant changes had come to their corner of Arizona. The railroad had reached Bodie, bringing increased commerce and new settlers. The Parker-Foster innovative ranching methods had been vindicated, with many neighboring ranches adopting similar practices. Matthew, now 22, had graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in agriculture, returning to the ranch with even more progressive ideas that Preston and Nora welcomed. Elizabeth, at 20, had inherited her mother's sharp mind for business and her father's sense of justice, becoming involved in the suffrage movement that was gaining momentum across the country. In 1902, Nathan Parker passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, having lived to see his dreams for the ranch fulfilled beyond his expectations. The community turned out in force for his funeral, a testament to the respect he had earned through his vision and perseverance. That autumn, as Preston and Nora marked their 20th wedding anniversary, they took a rare trip away from the ranch, traveling to San Francisco for 2 weeks. It was their first extended vacation since their honeymoon, and they savored the opportunity to rediscover each other away from the responsibilities of ranch and community. On their last evening in the city, they dined at an elegant restaurant overlooking the bay, the lights of the city twinkling around them like earthbound stars. "I have something for you," Preston said, reaching into his pocket. "To mark 20 years. He placed a small velvet box on the table. Nora opened it to find a ring set with a diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "Preston, it's beautiful," she breathed as he slipped it onto her finger beside her gold wedding band. "Not as beautiful as you," he said, his eyes taking in her face, still as lovely to him at 42 as it had been at 22. "Or as precious as these years we've shared." Nora reached across the table to take his hand. "If someone had told me that day in Cottonwood Canyon that the marshal who saved me would become my husband, the father of my children, my partner in everything that matters, I might not have believed it possible. And yet here we are," Preston said, his thumb caressing the back of her hand. "I think about how close I came to not being in that canyon that day, if I'd taken a different route tracking the Coulters." "Perhaps some things are meant to be," Nora suggested. "Perhaps we would have found each other anyway through some other circumstance." Preston nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'd like to think so, that what we have is too important to have been left to mere chance." As they returned to their hotel that night, walking arm in arm through the fog-shrouded streets, Nora felt the same sense of rightness, of belonging, that had characterized their life together from the beginning. Through all the changes and challenges of 2 decades, their connection had only deepened, like a tree sending its roots further into fertile soil with each passing season. The journey home to Arizona reaffirmed their commitment to the life they'd built. As the train carried them east, then south, the landscape gradually transforming from the lush coastal regions to the more austere beauty of the desert, Nora and Preston talked of the future of Matthew's plans to expand the ranch's operations, of Elizabeth's upcoming studies at a women's college in the East, of their hopes to see Arizona achieve statehood. Upon their return, they found the ranch running smoothly under Matthew's capable management, reinforcing their confidence in the legacy they were creating. That evening, as had become their custom over the years, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Dragoon Mountains in shades of gold and crimson. 20 years, Preston mused, his arm around Nora's shoulders. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I rode into that canyon and saw you standing there, defiant despite the danger. And sometimes it feels like we've always been together," Nora added, leaning into his embrace. "As if there was never a time when you weren't part of my life." Preston pressed a kiss to her temple. "The best part of my life began that day, Nora Foster, and it gets better with every year that passes. As the stars emerged in the deepening twilight, they remained on the porch, their conversation drifting from practical ranch matters to reminiscences of shared adventures to dreams still unfulfilled. The easy intimacy between them, built through thousands of such evenings, was a tangible expression of a love that had only grown richer with the passage of time. When Arizona finally achieved statehood in 1912, Preston and Nora attended the celebrations in Phoenix, proud to have played their part in the territory's development. At 58 and 52, respectively, they were still active in ranch operations, though they had gradually transferred more responsibilities to Matthew, who had married and had 2 children of his own. Elizabeth had returned from college in the East with a husband who shared her progressive values, establishing a home in Tucson where she became involved in educational reform. The world was changing rapidly around them. Automobiles were replacing horses on the streets of Bodie, telephones connected the once isolated ranches to town, and the Great War in Europe cast shadows even on their remote corner of Arizona. Yet through it all, the bond between Preston and Nora remained the steady center of their existence. In the spring of 1917, Preston retired as sheriff after 27 years of service. The townsfolk of Bodie honored him with a celebration that drew people from across the county, many of whom had stories to tell about how his fair-minded approach to law enforcement had made their community a better place. Now in their 60s, Preston and Nora found new pleasures in a somewhat slower pace of life. They doted on their grandchildren, traveled occasionally to visit Elizabeth in Tucson, and took pride in seeing the ranch continue to prosper under Matthew's guidance. On warm evenings, they still sat together on the porch of the ranch house, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes reminiscing about the full and extraordinary life they had built together. The star pendant that Preston had given Nora on their wedding day still hung around her neck, a constant reminder of the journey that had brought them to each other, and of the love that had sustained them through decades of shared joys and challenges. One such evening in the summer of 1922, as they watched their grandchildren playing in the yard, Nora turned to Preston with a smile that still had the power to quicken his heart. "If you had the chance to do it all again," she asked, "would you make the same choices? Ride into that canyon that day. Give up the marshal's badge for a life here with me." Preston's answer came without hesitation, his blue eyes as clear and certain as they had been on the day he first told her he loved her. "Every time, Nora. In this life or any other, I would always choose you." As the sun set on another day of their shared journey, Preston and Nora Foster held hands on the porch of the home they had built together, their love a testament to the truth that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, we find exactly where and with whom we are meant to be. From that fateful day in Cottonwood Canyon, when a young woman cornered by outlaws heard a cowboy say, "Step behind me," their story had unfolded in ways neither could have imagined. A love story written across decades, against the backdrop of a changing West, yet timeless in its essential truth. That love, real love, only grows stronger with each passing day.